so many things to go wrong. We just do our best.
Okay, so welcome to Jin Shin Institute, and I'm very happy and honored to have here with me Pamela Miles. She's a Reiki Master, teacher, practitioner, and she's a pioneer in the field of medical Reiki. She started Reiki in 1986, and I'm absolutely very grateful that you are here. I think we will have an interesting conversation about Reiki and the art of Jin Shin and energy, right? We have together almost 80 years of experience.
Oh my God.
And one of the things that you just said is that you've been practicing a long time, and even though you can start practicing very, very quickly, it takes some time to what?
It doesn't take much time at all to feel better, to feel some healing, but you can feel like you're healing, and yet it takes a long time to be profoundly healed. It takes a long time to mature as a practitioner. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true of a lot of things in life, but it's certainly true of these subtle practices. I think that's something that Jin Shin and Reiki practice probably have in common. I know I was lucky enough that I got a Jin Shin treatment yesterday, and I was so glad that worked out because it confirmed for me what my thoughts had been about how these two practices, where they overlap and where they're different. But the idea of having more time to practice, mm-hmm. practicing on yourself first, healing yourself first, and gradually getting the confidence not to do so much.
Mm-hmm. So in a way, less is more.
Very much so. I was observing you as you were practicing yesterday, and you were coming from a place of stillness. It was like stillness in action. Mm-hmm. So as a Jin Shin practitioner, you're moving and doing in a way that traditional Reiki practitioners aren't. But whatever your practice, to have that connection with stillness, with your inner timelessness, and to offer your presence from there, I think is a mark of a seasoned practitioner. Don't you?
Yes, I think so too. To have the I think that's where the time comes in that you're talking about, because in the beginning you're thinking more of what do I need to do,
right.
And then later, when the more you practice and practice the art of it, is when you can become still and take it from there, from our intuition and inner guidance.
Yeah, we have to practice long enough, have enough experience practicing to have the conviction that when we, as Reiki practitioners, place our hands, or for you, locate the points and make a contact, that when we do that, something's going to happen. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a response, because we came to these practices, and I think this is probably true of everyone, because we want to help.
So in Reiki, when you place your hands, does energy begin to move in the body? How does it work?
I don't know. But, we place our hands, and then the system responds in the way that it will. So with Reiki practice, it's all carried in the palms of our hands. It's a spiritual practice that's empowered through initiation. Jin Shin is a learned practice. You have skills. Mm-hmm. I don't have so many skills. I'm good at not doing anything. That's my skill.
How do you know where to place your hands?
There is a protocol that I use, a set protocol that I was taught, and different practitioners, different approaches to Reiki practice have different protocols. Some people don't use any protocol. They just, they'll say, well, I move my hands where they're needed. But I'm not so sure that they know where their hands are needed. And I think that they're getting too much into the doing, because with Reiki practice, you place your hands and there'll be a response. And we don't want to confuse the response with where our hands are needed, because the response is all over. It's systemic. It's not just where our hands are.
So do you get that information from the person?
What information?
Who you're treating, where you are going to place your hands?
No, I use a set protocol: crown of the head, face, throat, back of the head, chest, rib cage, navel, and lower abdomen. And what I do is I wait and move my hands when I feel that the response is slowing down. It's kind of a balance between that and watching the clock, because people come for appointments, you know, and they expect to be able to leave at a certain time. But if I'm practicing informally, you know, with a family member or something, I can just stay as long.
And do you practice, is there a time limit? Because in Jin Shin, we do have a time limit working on others. Not on yourself, but when you work on others, we use 60 minutes.
So we don't have a time limit, because Reiki practitioners are not working on people. See, you are targeting specific places that you want to open up, that you want this to happen or that to happen. I mean, it's not invasive, it's gentle, it's not like surgery, but still you have a plan of action. Yes. And with traditional Reiki practitioners, it's not really like that. You know, you just place your hands. It's a mindful offering of our hands and whatever it is that we carry in our Reiki hands through the grace of the initiation, which I think of some...
Can you explain, can you say a little bit more about the grace of initiation? What that is?
Not too much, because initiation is a mystical process, a mystical experience, mystical, mysterious. You know, we don't have equations for it, but the founder of this practice, Mikao Usui, who lived 1865 to 1926, decided, after he had his satori, his spiritual experience, and received this practice internally, or the spiritual experience that gave birth to the practice, he made a conscious decision to share the practice through an initiation lineage. And that's very common in spiritual traditions. You know, like for example in Tibetan Buddhism, I think a lot of people in the West have come across Tibetan Buddhism in some form. And there are lineages. You know, the teacher studies with his teacher, her teacher, and then passes what he or she has attained to students. And the idea of initiation is that it empowers the student to practice. So it's not a skill-based practice, it's an empowered practice.
When I say universal energy or light, is there anything that you like tap into, connect to as a practitioner? Or do you think about that?
I do not, and you know, maybe this is a good time for me to just say something about my particular perspective, because I came to Reiki practice in 1986, and I was already a professional healer and a meditation teacher, and I've been practicing meditation and yoga for almost 25 years. I'd lived in India for a couple of years in an ashram doing, you know, very intensive practices, sleeping like 4 hours a night and maybe doing 8 hours a day of spiritual practices, of non-dual spiritual practices. So when I came to Reiki practice, it wasn't your typical American. You know, I came with a foundation of experience and understanding. And when my friend, who had just taken the first degree class like a week or two before, placed her hands on my head, I felt very familiar sensations because I was used to them from meditation, from other healing practices. So I never bought into the usual story about how Reiki practice works, even though that's what I was fed. And I'm not saying that that usual story is wrong. I think it's incomplete, Alexis, because my experience is that the capacity of this practice is such that it can take us so much deeper into our timelessness, our timeless spiritual core, that experience of oneness that enables our system to really reset itself from within. So Jin Shin is coming at the body from outside, in a sense, and Reiki practice is more like inviting the system. Remember how to heal yourself. Remember who you really are,
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And we've had a little bit of this discussion before. I think it is very similar because even though we have set flow patterns that we're working with, and we listen to pulse, we still tune into exactly what you're talking about. That it comes. We are a jumper cable. It's like facilitating the healing of the body and not doing anything, or it's so in effect it is the same. I think it is the same. I think and also
I don't think it's the same. I think it's similar.
Yes,
I think that
exactly.
the initiation makes a difference.
But what you say about this oneness, feeling this oneness, and you achieve that also when you meditate. I mean, this is this place which brings us outside of our individual energy and the running around and the doing. And so after a session, the body of the receiver will be in that state.
Or
with this
or
oneness.
more in that direction.
More in that
because we're like, being human means at its best, I think, being aware of that timelessness, that oneness, and living our lives as individuals informed by that oneness, with our hearts open to that oneness.
Yeah, beautiful, yeah.
And when we have that experience, then we can't just hurt somebody else because we feel it in our hearts.
Ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because we're open and we have this direct connection.
And we know that in a very real way, there's one heart that pulses in this universe, and we're all expressions of that, but we're all responsible at the level of our individuality. So it can't be a spiritual bypass, or like the Reiki made me do it, I think that real spiritual practice, all spiritual practice, is to bring us into alignment with ourselves and our essential oneness, and it strengthens us. It doesn't make us spacey,
So we live there a lot of the time, I think, because I live there when I practice, and also when I practice on myself.
Right.
And you did it through also meditation and yoga, and all of these practices, I think, will bring us there. And this is also where healing takes place.
Yes, and healing takes place there because we've relieved ourselves of the constriction of time and space. We have to have these limitations in order to take form so we can manifest. But then we're like, this is uncomfortable, So we go inside and we experience that peacefulness again, and then we can express according to the laws of manifestation with a joyful, peaceful heart.
I like that very much. So you bring it from the oneness and back into the body.
And it's continual. It's not like, okay, I did that. I mean, we've talked about this, having a steady self-practice every day. And that changes your threshold for stress, You have more resilience in your system, and there's a lot of contemporary neuroscience that supports this. Because spiritual practice, Reiki, Jin Shin, other things, meditation, encourages the nervous system to downregulate. And when our nervous system, this is what happens on a physiologic level, very briefly, when our nervous system downregulates, then our systems naturally just let go of holding patterns. And then, our nervous system recalibrates itself from within. And if you're receiving a Jin Shin treatment, then you're getting a different kind of help as well.
Did it feel similar when you get a Reiki treatment and when you get a Jin Shin treatment, the experience?
It felt broadly similar, but when I practice Reiki on myself, and sometimes when I practice Reiki on somebody else, although I really work hard to stay awake when I'm practicing on somebody else, but sometimes I'll be drawn into the state yoga nidra, which it's called yogic sleep, and it's a very profound inner state in which you often lose conscious awareness. So that could possibly happen during a Jin Shin treatment. I don't know. It didn't happen yesterday.
Yeah, some people fall asleep as well with Reiki too.
Well, I'm
When you
not
treat
so
someone?
sure that they're asleep. I think they're really in this yogic
Yes,
state.
that is very good.
Yeah,
Yes,
because
that's
when
probably
they
the
come
better
out-
place to be.
Yeah, when you fall into a physiologic sleep during the day and you come out of it, you're like,
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of the male clients, they end up snoring away. It's more, I think the more aware you become, the more you stay awake. Actually very awake, because you become very aware, but in a deep state of relaxation, which is important for healing. This is a zero place.
Yeah, I think that we can maintain our awareness as we go deeper, but I think there's also a place at which we just lose awareness, and that's kind of a gift.
That sounds wonderful.
We just dissolve. But that's my experience. These are very subjective realities, and I don't think there are rules other than the difference between yoga nidra and physiologic sleep.
Can you talk a little bit about medical Reiki? You're responsible for bringing it into many hospitals.
Well, I started the first in-hospital Reiki program, and that arose from the work that I was doing at Gay Men's Health Crisis in the 1990s, teaching the community there to self-practice. And then I was asked to write medical papers because there was a real interest in medicine, especially when you're helping people with, say, cancer or AIDS, where there's a limit to what medicine can offer, and there's so much suffering, or sickle cell anemia, and doctors are very aware of the limits of what they can do, and spirituality has a place in medicine. That's why they have chaplains in hospitals. Doctors understand this is important, that patients with inner resources tend to do better. Even if they die, they have a more peaceful death, less pain and such. But it's not what doctors do anymore.
So they were open to receive you? And
They were
you there?
surprisingly open. Yeah, definitely, doctors are people like anybody else, and some of them were less open than others. But I was stunned by the openness I found once I was invited into medicine. It was as if I had an invisible MD stamped on my forehead, because doctors are interested, but they perceive a language gap. And they told me this. They said, I don't know what questions to ask you, because I don't know enough about what you do to ask the right questions. And doctors don't like to ask the wrong questions.
They look more at a symptom. If there's a problem in the leg, they look at the leg and they treat the leg, and we get the whole body moving.
We treat the person who is experiencing the complaint, whereas conventional medicine focuses on the complaint. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a match made in heaven. You know,
Yes, it's complementary. They work together.
Absolutely. If only we can communicate the value of what we do in terms that are meaningful to doctors, because conventional medicine carries its own kind of trauma. Life-saving surgery is very traumatic. And doctors know that bodies that have been traumatized don't heal as well. Because when you're in a trauma state or a post-trauma state, you're on hyper alert and your self-healing mechanisms are literally shut down. So helping the system to down-regulate out of that stressful state into a neutral state, and that opens the door for self-healing. So it's a beautiful complement, because what we're doing then is we're engaging the patient's body in the healing process instead of conventional medicine, which is done to the body, often in a rather aggressive way.
And that's empowering for the patient. Also, that
Absolutely.
they can do something to themselves, that even family can help to make them feel better, and probably to get them out of the hospital faster, which will then be less costly. So it's all the way around. It's a good thing.
It is.
To combine.
If only we can carry ourselves in a credible way and communicate that.
Yeah.
That's the tricky part. The practice itself, Reiki practice is easy. I know your practice involves a lot more skill. Reiki practice is easy, but talking about it.
You do, well, yes, so the question, like, what is Reiki? And so can we talk about, in your book you mentioned pulse?
Pulsation.
Pulsation.
Maybe I spoke of pulsation.
Can we talk about that? In Jin Shin, in the Art of Jin Shin, we use it when we place our hands. We feel a pulsation come up from the body. A pulse, it's a pulsation, and the individual pulse is being harmonized with the universal energy, and it becomes one rhythm, and it changes, and energy spirals. How is that in Reiki? Or do you feel pulse?
People feel things, people don't feel things. With Reiki
No, for
practice,
you, when you practice on someone.
I want to say this for everybody, because you don't have to feel anything to be effective in your Reiki practice. That's really important for people to know. They can just place their hands and leave them there. Move their hands, leave them there. Move their hands, leave them there. And if they practice like that for half an hour every day, pretty soon they're going to notice a difference in their state.
And that's the same for us. It's the same. You don't have to feel anything. And just from your perspective, having placed your hands on many different bodies, what do you feel, or do you feel anything?
I feel a lot. I was a healer before I learned to practice Reiki. So that's why I like to distinguish between my experience and what other people might experience.
So when you teach, do you teach the placements of the holes? We'll have to take one of your seminars.
Yeah, I would love you to do that.
Do you talk about the experience of it, or when you teach?
I don't talk so much about the experience, but I elicit the students to articulate their experience, and I encourage them to just describe how they feel after they've practiced, so that they start noticing a little difference, because sometimes people think, oh, it's got to be this huge difference, and it's not like that. It's a little different, and a little different, and a little different, and when you're consistent in making a little difference like that, then at the end of a period of time, you've really made quite a difference. Whereas you could have one kind of wow healing experience, but then 3 days later, you don't really feel any different. It has to do with supporting ourselves in an ongoing way, not just moving us from here to there. Well, then how do we stay there? If we haven't built the foundation gradually through regular care.
Are you talking mainly about working on yourself or practicing on others in Reiki? What is the main
The
practice?
foundation is daily self-practice. And that's something that I'm a real champion of. You can created a badge some years ago that says, I practice self-Reiki every day. And it's translated into 32 languages.
Yes, yeah.
Because so many people don't realize that, you know, this is the beginning of whatever good I can bring into the world is taking care of myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, same for us, and that's how it started also. Jeremiah is the father of Jin Shin Jitsu. He would treat people, but then he would give them self-help because he would only see them every couple of weeks and told them to practice on themselves every day. So, very important as well.
Yes, because every day all these things are happening in our lives that are knocking us off balance, you know, so we have to have ongoing care.
Will you share, we can each share a little self-help, like one simple thing for our community?
Yeah, I can show what the practice looks like, but remember that Reiki practice is empowered by an initiation. So without the initiation, you can't practice Reiki, but you can still do something good for yourself, laying on of hands, healing. And after I wrote the book, people started coming to my class and saying, "Oh, I started practicing from the book," you know, and I would think, did you read
the book?
This
Pamela signed it for me. I'm a proud owner of Reiki, a comprehensive guide.
So
it's very practical. It's like, can you become a practitioner? It explains how it works.
How can you find a good practitioner to work with, you know, a good teacher. That's a good teacher and good for you because we all have different personalities. But people would come to class and they'd say, I started practicing from the book. And they were so enthusiastic, I didn't want to dampen that. You know, but I was thinking, did you read the part where it says you can't learn to practice in the book, you know? And then what I discovered eventually was that they had started a daily self-care ritual for themselves, where they would move their hands to the placements, the crown of the head, or, you know, like this, the face, the throat, the back of the head, the chest, the rib cage, the navel, and then you have to stretch your legs out if you're sitting and your hands at your lower abdomen. And so just taking 20 or 30 minutes a day and placing their hands mindfully on themselves and not trying to do something, of course that was helping them. So, and then when they got the initiation in the class, they noticed that it was like it escalated.
So do you need to take initiation? Are you being initiated by a Reiki Master?
Yes.
So you find somebody first, and then you will be initiated. Is that how it works?
Yes, you take the training first. And recently, I started offering Reiki self-care training online because I heard from so many people that they had had a not satisfying experience in a class, or that they just couldn't find anyone near them, or they have young children, or they're disabled, or they're housebound, or, you know, so many reasons why people couldn't get to a class that suited them. And in the online class, we focus only on Reiki self-care. In my in-person classes, we also practice on one another, you know, and I show the table treatment, but the online classes are just self-care.
Do you touch the body when you work on others? And what's the difference? Is it sometimes or sometimes not?
So I don't work on others. This is something that I have to keep reminding people. I practice Reiki, and to my understanding, from the very beginning in Japan in the early 1920s, Reiki was practiced through touch, which, you know, that wasn't a very touchy-feely culture. But if there is, like maybe if I burned my hand or something cooking and I couldn't touch, then I could float my hand above it. But it is as needed rather than the basic practice.
And it's gentle touch, right? It's very, very gentle because it's not considered body work.
You're not manipulating tissue.
Right, and you also don't need a license to, like in New York State, you need, when you place your hands, often you need a license. And with Reiki,
The legal situation is complicated. Every state is different,
Right.
but broadly speaking, license generally is related to the capacity to hurt. So if you're manipulating tissue, if you're digging in there like with massage,
Right.
still some states feel that it's not necessary to have a license for massage. But you need to find
In New
out.
York you do,
It-
for example.
I'm
When you place your hands, you need, like, I need a license, I place my hands, but you have explained to me the last time we met is that in Reiki, it stands on its own because you don't manipulate. I mean, you said it was a movement that made that happen, that you don't need to be licensed, which I think is wonderful. I mean,
we petitioned the Massage Board of Discipline because they had included Reiki practice under their purview, but we said, look,
Yeah.
we're not massaging. And
Yeah.
fortunately, there were a few women on the board who had Reiki experience, and they got it. And so they voted to release Reiki practice. So some states have done that, some states have not. The legal situation, if anybody is interested, they can go to my website and email me through the contact form, and I can give them a good resource for that, because you've got to find out what's happening in your area, and then you have to stay on top of it,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it can change like that.
Yeah. Through your book, you said one of the reasons that you wrote it was to make it more well known also, which you did, right? I mean, you really put the practice on the map
You know
for a
what?
great deal.
Yeah, what I've done is I've moved it to a mainstream public. I mean, there's still a lot more work to be done, but the book was published in 2003, so a while ago. It's still the only book on Reiki practice that is really written for a mainstream audience. That has nothing woo about it, nothing, no new age beliefs attached to it, just very simple. And sometimes people will say to me, oh, I love the stripped down Zen practice you have. It's like, no, it's not a stripped down Zen practice. This is how I was taught. This is how the practice was brought out of Japan, and then Americans have made it more complicated because
Yeah,
that's what we do.
it's a similar story with the Art of Jin Shin. Because in Japan it's already part of the culture, and so in the West it has had to be introduced, the philosophical concepts and just the understanding of this oneness that you were talking about. So I just want to tell you about my book that I just wrote.
Yes, I
And
can't
it's-
wait to read it.
I don't
I
have the
wanna
book
learn
yet
a
because
couple
it's
things.
published and you can hold it for me in June 25th. And the reason why I wrote it is also so that it will be known, because and for the mainstream people. So there, it's not esoteric, even though it's an art and explaining that and the vastness of the practice, but also as simple as just holding a finger and getting into the breath. And so this is published by Simon & Schuster on June 25th. It's coming out.
We'll
so
have a party.
we will. I hope you will come to the pop party. And we're even
I'll be in
no,
France.
actually, we may do it in September.
Oh,
Because some of the people, and then maybe you will be part of my panel.
I would love to. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I wanted to tell our community, both our communities, and hopefully they will become one, that you will have an interactive online program that starts May 11.
Yes, that's the online Reiki self-care training that I mentioned before, and it's 3 sessions, the 11th, the 12th, and the 18th. So it's about 3 hours. In New York, it's 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., but we've had people from Europe and other parts of the U.S. as well. And if people in Australia or other places need a different time, they should just contact me, because I'm happy to schedule at a time that works.
Okay, good. And you also have workshops in New York, right?
Here in Manhattan, I teach first degree Reiki at least once a month, and then I have ongoing courses for people who are already practicing Reiki and want to deepen their practice, and a retreat in Mexico.
Yeah, nice.
I can't
So
wait.
you travel a lot.
I
You
travel a
quite
fair
bit,
amount,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, nice. And I just forgot to mention that my book is for pre-order now, and it's important because it's on Amazon, so people can pre-order that.
Yeah.
And are there any questions, Michael?
Yeah, so we've got one for you, Pamela, from Aurora Matias. She's curious to know when there are times when you might practice the art of Jin Shin versus Reiki. Is there situations where one is more beneficial than the other, in your opinion?
You know, I don't think there are rules about that. I think that we want to follow our intuition, and one thing that helps you connect with your intuition really quickly, because it settles the nervous system globally so fast, is to practice Reiki. So generally I say first Reiki practice, because then if something else is needed, you'll notice that right away, and then you'll be in a better place to practice that. You know, especially if something upsetting has happened, maybe you're at a party, you know, somebody has a heart attack or something like that, place your Reiki hand, and then if you're trained in Jin Shin, your training will just kick in right
You
away
can hold
once
a
you
little
come.
finger.
Yeah, or bite it.
That's right. Yesterday you said something that it could be interesting to even combine it in a session. It could be interesting, and I think that's probably what you mean, is to start by Reiki and then getting into Jin Shin. It could be an interesting thing also. We can explore that.
I think it's helpful. I think that Jin Shin, a little bit of Jin Shin knowledge is helpful for Reiki practitioners, and I think that having Reiki training is helpful for Jin Shin practitioners. You know, even though I practice Reiki every day and have since 1986, and you know, eat well, do lots of things, still there are times when I need more, and then it would be helpful to know a couple of Jin Shin techniques, you know.
Yes.
And for a Jin Shin practitioner, if they're agitated or something and they practice Reiki, they would settle quickly and then move into enacting their Jin Shin practice.
So I just have one more question. There's not really a technique. Would you say it's an art, Reiki?
I'd say it's a spiritual practice.
Okay.
So I don't like to use the word technique, because technique is so much littler than a practice. You know, and practice gives the idea, it's not like practice makes perfect. That's the way we tend to think. With spiritual practice, practice makes present. And when we're present, then we have so much support available to us, and so much support that we can also offer others. But if we're not present, we have no power, right? We're not
Beautiful.
connected.
Yes, I like it very much. Thank you. Just Michael, is there any more questions?
No questions yet. There is a general comment from Nandita Segan, who wishes that you could plan your next Reiki intensive in Louisville, Kentucky. So
So tell her to email me through my my website, and we can discuss that.
Okay, well, Pamela, it was a real honor to have you here, and I think, is there anything else that you would like to add? I think we will keep communicating and maybe even do some collaboration, which can be interesting.
Yeah, I first of all, I want to thank you, Alexis, for inviting me to be part of this. I think it's a wonderful way of creating community, and I hope this conversation continues. And you know, I was thinking that you and I might try something. Let's see, how about, I'm putting her on the spot, all of you can bear witness to this.
Okay.
What if we practice together for like 3 weeks? I'll be in New York for the next 3 weeks. That's where I came up with the idea. And if we got together once a week, and I practice Reiki on you, and you practice Jin Shin on me, and just see, you know, that way we would get to know more. about one another's practices and benefit.
I think that sounds absolutely wonderful.
You like that idea?
I like that.
Good.
So we'll do that and we'll report. We can report back.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
For
Bye.
part 2.
Bye.